Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is DarkHaven, and today we've got some very interesting updates around CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk 2077, including some more positive updates for the game. Finally, I know it's been a struggle with this game, and I know that the positive updates are definitely the biggest, but there's also been some embarrassing revelations around things. It's not necessarily a huge deal, but it's definitely interesting nonetheless, and it's things that I wanted to talk about and highlight. So, starting off, the biggest news here is that CD Projekt Red has initiated a settlement agreement against their shareholders who were suing them. Now, if you guys haven't been following the situation, basically CD Projekt Red, before release of the Cyberpunk 2077 game, made it seem like the last gen version of Cyberpunk 2077, that being the version on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, wasn't actually that bad and that it ran pretty good. Obviously, of course, unless you've been living under a rock, and as we found out, that was definitely pretty misleading, or at least that's what the shareholders felt, so they sued CDPR. They kind of deserved it, not gonna lie. And not too long ago, we heard how CD Projekt Red was trying to get this whole thing dismissed in court, and how they actually entered into settlement talks. And it seemed like those talks were successful because the update that came earlier this week is that the settlement agreement between the two parties that has been agreed on, as they do say according to the term sheet, is that members of this class, including the plaintiffs, are to relinquish any and all claims against the company and members of its management board. In return, a settlement in the amount of $1,850,000 shall be paid out to the class by the company and its insurer, as expressly stated in the term sheet. Now, execution of the term sheet does not imply admission of any responsibility on part of the company or any of the other defendants named in the case. So, CD Projekt Red isn't admitting that they did anything wrong here. And even further, if you're curious what do they mean by any other defendants, basically it means that this lawsuit was against CD Projekt Red, the company, but also several of the high-level members of the company who were present during the investor calls. So it's also saying that these individual people, in addition to the company, aren't admitting any guilt as to why this decision was made, and that the company wishes to announce that its decision to enter into the settlement agreement was motivated by the duration and the costs related to further legal proceedings in the US, which might arise irrespective of the court findings. So technically, right now, this isn't finalized. The court itself has to actually allow this to go through, but it most likely will. And overall, this seems like a big win for CD Projekt Red, guys, for just $1.8 million. I know that sounds like a lot of money to us, but to them, it's fucking pocket change. They're literally going to get out of this lawsuit, and they're going to be able to put it behind them. And it won't drag out. They won't have some super long court war where they have to spend millions and millions and millions on lawyer fees. They just pay $1.8 million in settlement funds, and then they get out of it. And it seems like they definitely wanted that. Just a couple of weeks after filing for that motion to dismiss it, they did get things wrapped up entirely. And on the financial side, the CD Projekt Red stocks did go up a fair amount today. Now, obviously, it's not totally clear how much of that are other micro factors versus this one specific factor, but it likely did play at least a somewhat substantial role. And it seems like this was a good move by CDPR to put this behind them so they could start off 2022 almost fresh. Now, they could definitely have the next gen version release and have it basically be a soft relaunch of the game and hopefully continue to win back the players' sentiments, but they say it's a good thing for the company and it's not necessarily good in a moral standpoint view, or speaking of the company. Now, we did recently have the Game Awards, just made a video on that the other day. Guys, go check that out if you want to see it. And CD Projekt Red obviously didn't win any awards, despite, surprisingly, Cyberpunk 2077 being nominated for 2. Although it did win one Game of the Year award, which a lot of fans are obviously latching onto. And that's the Cyberpunk 2077 PC version being declared the best game of 2021 by IGN Japan. So that's obviously very specific. It was a top 10 list. And again, it was the PC version, not the console version of Cyberpunk that won. Now, me personally, I kind of think that's questionable. Don't get me wrong, I do like the game, but it's definitely not the best game of 2021, in my eyes at least. My favorite game of the year personally goes towards Resident Evil 8 Village. Now, let's transition into the more embarrassing side of the recent CD Projekt Red headlines. Recently, we had a ton of marketing for The Matrix Awakens. Looks awesome, by the way. If you guys haven't seen it yet, go check that shit out on YouTube. They actually have a demo available on the PS5 as well. And I'm talking about the Epic Games experience, but also the movie. And as a result, there were some interviews with Keanu Reeves back in the day, aka Johnny Silverhand from the game. And from this interview with The Verge, we did get a couple of interesting quotes.
Do you play video games?
No.
No, really?
No.
Even Cyberpunk?
No, I mean, I've seen demonstrations, but I've never played it.
Now, that's okay, guys. Obviously, Keanu is no Henry Cavill. He's not super into video games, and that's completely fine. It's not really a big deal at the same time. But, you know, unless we roll the clock back to December of 2020, where we have this quote from the CEO of Project Red himself.
Has Keanu Reeves played the game? Yes, he played the game, but as far as I know, haven't finished yet. So, but definitely he played the game and he loves it.
So basically, you have the CEO of Project Red saying that Keanu has not only played Cyberpunk, but that he was loving it while he was playing it, versus Keanu Reeves himself saying that he hasn't actually played the game. Now, this story obviously isn't really that big of a deal. Out of all the lies that potentially have come from CD Projekt Red, this falls very, very short on the list. It's definitely one of the lesser ones, and it's kind of silly to come back to this, but it's only news due to the fact that it's more popular to criticize Cyberpunk and CDPR right now. I'm not saying it's not justified, they deserve all the hate they're getting right now, but as to what's actually happened, perhaps Keanu did play a small segment of the game or a few small segments of the game at some point. I mean, naturally, he must have seen at least something or done something, considering that he is a very big main character in the game. And although this is kind of a silly story to pop up again, it's not necessarily the biggest deal in the world, and I'm obviously not mad at it getting called out, because if you look back, this several second long interaction actually spawned a ton of articles. There's a ton of positive press that resulted in this, and it actually being corrected now and more truthful does seem somewhat appropriate. Now, as far as Cyberpunk 2077 goes right now, the modding scene has actually been getting a ton of super good quality of life mods. We of course have continued to see a lot of positive sentiment around the theme from new and incoming players. This past weekend, Cyberpunk was also crossed the 30,000 active players mark on Steam. Now that's a huge amount of players that we have not seen since February. So it's making a comeback, guys. It's finally making a comeback. For November, in the past 2 weeks of December, we've seen some pretty hefty player gains as far as the averages go overall. So it's not like it's just peaking out at certain moments. The overall player count is definitely up, and that's a good thing, and you have to imagine that CDPR is obviously thrilled with this. So it's definitely again setting up that nice layup going into 2022. Now that they have the lawsuits behind them, they can actually focus on making some great stuff. I mean, as long as what they're actually planning lands and doesn't suck or released buggy and, broken as hell. Now, we obviously haven't seen any trailers at the Game Awards for it, and I'm not super shocked by that, but we do now have this interesting waiting game. Q1 is only 3 months, so hypothetically, in a month, we could be getting the next-gen version. Now, highly doubt that, because we'll most likely know about it at least a little bit more beforehand, but they could also just kind of drop it as a surprise update to, surprise the fans and make us happy. And we also do have this backlog of DLCs and expansions that are just sitting there waiting, so it'll be interesting to see how all of this evolves and comes together. As far as CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk going forward, I don't imagine we're going to see much news. A lot of these companies do start to slow down with the holiday seasons, but either way, that's the update around Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt Red, guys. Obviously, the big news is probably still a few weeks to at least a few months away, depending on what they plan on doing in 2022. But with all that being said, I am happy that the game is finally starting to get some good and positive reviews. It seems like they're finally getting the game fixed. Still upset, it should have been this way at launch, but I digress. And, the mod support is great. But with all that being said, hopefully you guys found this video informative and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, thanks for watching. This is DarkHaven signing out. Have a good one. Peace.